Welcome to NBA Now by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and on today's show, we're going to be discussing some NBA trade rumors after the first 2 weeks of the season. We've officially crossed that point in the year, and even though we're just 7-8 games into the season for each squad, the trade rumors are already heating up on the market before the February trade deadline. And before we get into some of these rumors, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because when these rumors pop up and stuff happens in the NBA, we'll have you covered, so make sure you hit that sub button and join the channel. But most of the reason why we're talking about this today is because Bleacher Report had 10 top trade targets and where they could possibly land in the NBA if they were dealt before the deadline, and give best landing spots as well, where Giannis Antetokounmpo kind of headlines these NBA trade rumors after the report a week and a half ago stating that he could request out if the Bucks struggle. And at the time of filming this, Milwaukee is 1-6 at the bottom of the Eastern Conference and hurting in a really big way. So could he be dealt, and is the best landing spot the Thunder, which Bleacher Report kind of labeled them as? And I'll say this. A Giannis Thunder combination would be unbelievable. And if you're looking at it from Milwaukee's side first, and you ultimately do trade Giannis Antetokounmpo, there's some teams that make sense. Brooklyn has a lot of picks, some decent young talent as well. Same thing with Houston, and then same thing with OKC. So you look at those three teams in the Western Conference, with the two of them being Houston and OKC, and then the East and Brooklyn, and the packages start to make a lot of sense for Milwaukee. And you look at the Thunder, who might have the most reason to do this. You pair up SJ and Giannis, and then you'd likely be able to keep at least one of your young guys in Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, and you have an absolute star trio in the making in Thundertown. But on Milwaukee's side, you'd be able to get a lot of assets. And when you look at what the Thunder could potentially trade, they have 15-plus tradable first-round picks. So they could legitimately offer 6, 7, 8 first-round picks, whatever the maximum you're allowed to do in the CBA, the Thunder could do. But they could also attach a couple young guys. I said Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. They'd likely not trade both of them, but they can choose which one they'd rather keep in Jalen and Chet Holmgren, and then trade off Case and Wallace. So you're talking about Case and Wallace and one of Chet or Jalen Williams, plus a plethora of draft picks for Giannis Antetokounmpo. You create a nasty big three. Probably want to keep Chet Holmgren in this scenario and have a Chet-Giannis front court with the SJ in the back court. Still would have a Caruso, Lou Dort type on the perimeter. It would just be a match made in heaven and would make the Thunder the best team in the NBA without a question, and the NBA title favorites. It makes a ton of sense for each side. And if Giannis ultimately does get dealt and would be fine going to OKC, I think that makes a lot of sense for the Thunder to try to pursue. How about the Warriors going after Jimmy Butler? Butler has been labeled as the second top trade target in the NBA, and the Warriors were labeled as the best fit. And we mentioned the Rockets with Giannis. I think the Rockets could be in play with Jimmy Butler as well, no questions about it. And specifically when looking at Jimmy to Golden State, it does make sense as the Warriors are off to a blazing start this year. They're at the top of the Western Conference, and if they want to add a co-star that is more cemented, battle-proven, playoff-driven player, Jimmy Butler makes a lot of sense. Another team that has a decent amount of trade assets as well, because when you look at what they have multiple first-round picks. They have 2 they can trade, plus pick swaps. They also have some young talent in Jonathan Kuminga or Brandon Podziemski. Now, Kuminga is a restricted free agent, so it's a little bit of a question mark to see if Miami would want him in any type of move. But it is something that you'd have to keep your eye on for. I don't know if Miami's willing to blow it up just yet, but I do think that the Warriors are a landing spot for Butler, as he would provide them with clutch scoring and some, I guess, relief of burdening Steph Curry for having to do it all. Now, you've seen Buddy Hield and other players step up here early in the season, but when you get to the postseason and teams game plan for you hardcore in a 7-game series, you're going to need another difference maker on the perimeter and wing to be a bucket getter, a two-way guy. They thought they were going to have that for a long time with Andrew Wiggins. He has struggled mightily this season, and maybe Jimmy Butler is that guy they go out and acquire at the deadline to really try to hone in and get Steph Curry another championship before he retires, as he is getting closer and closer to his age 40 season. We still got 3 more players to break down here, but we are sponsored by Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports platform out there. And They are just the best. I play them on a daily basis, and I suggest you join them as well because you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks right now with as little as 4 correct entries. It's the best way to get in on the action with it being available in over 30 states like California, Florida, Georgia, Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's absolutely guaranteed. And you can play any way you want, whether it's daily, whether it's season long across all sports leagues. I got a daily one in today's basketball action. I got Giannis Antetokounmpo, 48.5 points, rebounds, assists, and more than. Less than Chris Paul, 24.5 points, rebounds, assists, and then more than on Anthony Simons, 21.5 points. This is a 3-player entry to win 5 times my money, but like I said, you could win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks right now on Prize Picks. Think Anthony Edwards going to have more than 3 threes. Think Steph Curry is going to have more than 27 points. Cook up your hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Shout out to them for sponsoring today's show. That link is going to be in the live chat and description of today's episode. All right, as we move on here, let's talk about Karl-Anthony Towns. Could he be going to the Orlando Magic? This has got to be the most head-scratching one that Bleacher Report had. They had him as the 3rd guy on their trade target list, or trade board, if you will. And to me, it makes no sense because the reasoning for them is that there could be buzz that they acquired Cat with the idea of maybe moving off of him, and maybe that in this specific scenario they laid out on BR that Giannis goes to New York and they use Cat to ship out. Well, if they do that, could Orlando be a spot for Anthony Towns? I don't know why you'd want to get rid of Cat, though, if you're New York. Yes, they've got off to a slow start. They're 3-4, but Karl-Anthony Towns is not the reason why. He's been everything that they could have possibly dreamed of and as advertised as possibly could have wanted. He's averaging 23.1 points per game, 13 rebounds while shooting 51% from the field, and a staggering 57.1% from beyond the arc. Karl-Anthony Towns has been the best player on the New York Knicks. He's outplayed Jalen Brunson through the first 2 weeks of the season. Mikal Bridges hasn't woken up yet. And OG Anunoby has been a nice side piece, but he's not going to lead a basketball team. So if you're New York, I just think you'd battle this out, not try to make a big move to acquire Giannis. You have the talent that you want to compete in the Eastern Conference. You just got to let these guys gel together. And once Jalen Brunson starts playing Jalen Brunson basketball, well, then maybe that's when you start to see this uptick in Knicks wins and they finish with a top 3, top 4 record in the East. But say this hypothetical goes through and he gets traded to the Magic and this is a landing spot for him, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, they have needed scoring from the perimeter. Paolo Banchero's injured, but he looks like an absolute franchise-changing player. Franz Wagner's a great number 2 option right now, but if you get Karl-Anthony Towns, you don't have a front court of Wagner, Banchero, Cat. You have Cat as your number 2 option, Banchero as your 1, and Wagner as your 3, with Suggs maybe being in there still in the backcourt with KCP. And now you're looking at a roster that is just unbelievably talented from top to bottom. I think the Magic would make sense if Cat was dealt. I just don't see a world where Karl-Anthony Towns ends up getting traded from the Knicks this season. They're at least going to give it a full year. How about Brandon Ingram being traded to the Miami Heat? Miami has been labeled as the top and best landing spot for Brandon Ingram. And to me, it just makes a lot of sense for the Pelicans to get rid of Ingram. It has not worked. Him and Zion just simply have not gelled together. They've given it an extended period of time to see if these two guys can coexist. It's not happening. And I know DeJounte Murray's out. CJ McCollum's banged up as well. And you're not seeing this team in full action, but they haven't been able to stockpile wins early on in the season. And it might be addition by subtraction for the Pelicans. Plus, Brandon Ingram is going to be a free agent this upcoming offseason, and it doesn't seem like New Orleans has any indications or wants to give him a long-term contract where Ingram potentially wants over $200 million through 4 years, getting $50 million per season. I don't think Brandon Ingram is that type of player. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a third option on a contending team. But to get $50+ million, you got to be a top 2 option. And I don't see that being a case for New Orleans or Brandon Ingram. So if they did trade him, would Miami make sense? Well, I don't really know if it does. Does a Jimmy Butler, Brandon Ingram, Bam Adebayo front court really move the needle in Miami? Plus, the Heat would have to make a decision in the offseason if they're going to give the 2-year Supermax extension to Jimmy Butler or give a long-term deal to Brandon Ingram. Right now, the way Jimmy's playing in Miami, you'd have to lean that Pat Riley and company aren't going to give him an extension. But would they feel it the right move to do it with Brandon Ingram? I'm not so sure. This might be a short-term thing for BI in Miami, but even then, I don't know if that raises the ceiling for this Miami Heat basketball team. And then you're just going to find yourselves in the same spot of trading assets for a player you might not keep on your roster long term. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense for each side. Last one we're going to talk about today is Trae Young going into the San Antonio Spurs. Young is a match made in heaven for San Antonio, and it's been heavily rumored that this is a landing spot for Trae Young if he's dealt away from the Hawks for a long time. And I could just envision the Spurs taking that next step forward if they get Young. He's still averaging 25 plus a game, still being an absolute dominant ball handler and playmaker, averaging nearly 10 assists per game for Atlanta. If they decide to completely blow it up and go with the youth movement, they can get some young assets from San Antonio, some picks, and really start to move forward. Stephon Castle comes to mind if you're talking about a trade piece going from the Spurs to the Hawks. And when you think of what you'd be moving forward with in San Antonio and why this makes sense, you need a point guard to play with Wemby long term. I like what Chris Paul has actually brought to the table early on as a veteran in terms of setting up Wemby, but Victor hasn't even had a good start to the year, only averaging 18 points a game, shooting very inefficient from three, under 25%, as well as under 45% from the field, which is not common for centers, specifically ones of that size. So getting a lob threat like Trae Young into the ball handling mix would be helpful. Devin Vassell is going to return from injury soon. You get a three-man group of Trae Young, Wembanyama. Those are your top two options, with Vassell being that off-ball creator and shooter and defender to pair up with Trae Young in the backcourt, or even play a little small ball three on the wing. That is a very solid trio for San Antonio moving forward. I think Trae Young, if he were to be traded, the Spurs should be the number one spot for the former top 5 pick out of Oklahoma, and it makes a lot of sense for both sides to potentially go through with a deal if Atlanta wants to blow it up and move off of Trae Young. All right, that's going to do it for today's NBA Trade Rumors video. Appreciate everyone watching. If you're still watching today's episode and have Twitter, go give me a follow over there at Nic_Rohloff is my handle. I'm talking about NBA basketball every day. If you have any thoughts on my opinions or trade destinations for these guys, I won't be afraid to respond to you in my DMs or the replies on X. So go give me a follow at Nic_Rohloff.